Beneath the ice and silence of the Arctic, some of the deadliest predators from the Ice Age are still lying in wait. Saber-toothed cats, ancient wolves, and cave lions so fresh, scientists are considering cloning them. These are terrifying frozen creatures scientists are too afraid to defrost. Deep in the frozen wilds of Siberia, a creature straight out of prehistoric times was found curled up in the permafrost, a baby saber-toothed cat. It was discovered in 2020 near the Indigirka River, and despite being over 35,000 years old, the thing looked like it had only been dead a few days. It had thick fur, skin, claws, even its internal organs. It was all still there, and yes, the tiny sabers too. Scientists think it might have been buried in a landslide and flash frozen before decay could even start, and wasn't alone. Another cub, a few years younger, was found in the same region, preserved the same eerie way. But nobody's rushing to thaw these little killers out. The deeper they look, the more they realize just how little they know about these ancient predators. There's something about seeing a baby version of something so dangerous, though, that just hits different. Like, it's cute, but also very much not. In 2016, a gold miner working near Dawson City in Canada's Yukon Territory came across something in the permafrost, a perfectly preserved Ice Age wolf pup, frozen for over 57,000 years. It wasn't a skeleton or a pile of fur and bones, it was an entire wolf, with skin, fur, tiny claws, even some of its whiskers were still intact. Genetic testing showed that it came from an ancient extinct branch, older than modern gray wolves, and adapted to a world most humans wouldn't survive 5 minutes in. They think it died inside its den. Maybe the roof collapsed, maybe the ground shifted, but either way, something sealed it in tight and froze it solid before decay had even had a chance to start. And that kind of preservation doesn't happen unless the timing is perfect, and honestly, it's a little creepy how perfect it was. The more scientists studied it, the more questions they had about its species, about how it got so well preserved, about what else might be hiding under the ice just as intact. In the Siberian permafrost, scientists found 2 cave lion cubs so well preserved they didn't really look ancient, they looked recent. But these weren't house cats. They were baby versions of Panthera spile, aka the Eurasian cave lion. These things were massive, possibly larger than modern lions, and built for brute power. They hunted mammoths, they hunted bison, they hunted each other. One study found bones of a cave lion that had been gnawed on by another cave lion. The 2 frozen cubs, dubbed Sparta and Boris, are estimated to be around 30,000 years old, and scientists still don't know how they died exactly, but they're so well preserved, they're actually talking of cloning. The thing is, nobody's sure what kind of animal behavior you'd get out of these things if you actually defrosted them. Their instincts are 30,000 years old and hardwired for a world we don't live in anymore. So what could possibly go wrong there? In 2015, researchers in Siberia discovered a frozen woolly rhino calf that had been locked in ice for over 34,000 years. Its name is Sasha, and it's the only baby woolly rhino ever found. And it's not just bones, this thing still had skin, hair, a stubby little horn, even muscle tissue. But don't let the baby part fool you, woolly rhinos were absolute tanks. Adults could weigh over 2 tons, with horns up to 3 feet long, and you'd think for their size that they'd be slow too, but fossil evidence shows they could charge like a freight train, and they likely had tempers to match. These animals were built for war against the cold, against predators, and sometimes even against each other. Ancient cave art shows humans were just terrified of these things, often drawing them mid-charge or goring other animals, or again locked in battle with each other. If anyone's thinking of cloning a few of these things, they better make sure the fencing is just really strong. You can't see them with the naked eye, but Deloid rotifers are kind of freaky. These tiny aquatic creatures were found frozen in the Siberian permafrost, buried 11 feet deep and at least 24,000 years old. Scientists thawed them out and they started moving. So after 2.5 ice ages, they just woke up. They also cloned themselves. Deloid rotifers reproduce through parthenogenesis, which means they've got no need for males. They can just endlessly self-copy, and they don't just survive cold. They can endure radiation, starvation, dehydration, even the vacuum of space. Their bodies will just shut down but stay preserved, and then when conditions are right, they kind of reboot. Now, scientists are wondering how long they can actually last and how many more are still down there dormant, waiting.
In 2007, a Japanese fishing vessel hauled up a deep-sea nightmare that had been flash frozen by Antarctic currents. What they found was a giant squid over 33 feet long, preserved in near-perfect condition. While that sounds impressive, what disturbed scientists was the state of its flesh. Bruised, slashed, and twisted as if it had been in a violent underwater battle. Some marine biologists even suggested it may have been attacked by something bigger, something we still haven't discovered. The carcass was frozen within minutes, locking it in a final, twisted pose. You'd think 42,000 years would be long enough for a creature to disappear from memory. Not this one. In 2007, Russian scientists discovered a female woolly mammoth calf named Lyuba in the frozen Yamal Peninsula. What made her special wasn't just the condition, she was almost perfectly preserved with eyelashes and internal organs, but here's the creepy part. Her stomach still contained her mother's milk. Scientists believe she suffocated in mud, then froze so quickly that her last meal never had time to digest, like she was just flash frozen right there in time. In the 1950s, a monastery in Nepal claimed to have part of a yeti hidden away, preserved in ice for generations. I don't know about you, but when I think of a yeti, I always think of the yeti from Monsters Inc. Snow cone? When explorer Peter Byrne visited the Pangbosh Monastery in 1959, he managed to smuggle part of the mummified Yeti hand out to the west. It was large, leathery, and completely unlike a human or an ape. DNA tests later said it was human, but experts were definitely skeptical. Some believed the tests were rigged to just shut the case down and get everybody to stay quiet, and miraculously the hand disappeared shortly after being analyzed, and the rest of the Yeti remains were reportedly stolen, adding even more mystery to the creature's icy legend. What do you guys think? Yeti, real creature, or just the stuff of legends? In 2021, a Siberian team unearthed what looked like a deformed canine in the ice, only to realize that it actually had two skulls. At first glance, they thought it was just a twisted pose caused by decay, but CT scans actually confirmed the creature had two heads, two spines, and a single set of ribs. It was believed to be a rare Ice Age mutation, possibly caused by environmental stress or even possibly inbreeding. But here's where things get even crazier. The second head was fully formed with sharp teeth and all. Some researchers feared this wasn't a natural deformity, but evidence of ancient genetic experimentation gone wrong. Beneath the Antarctic ice, scientists discovered a fish so strange it shouldn't even be alive. Meet the crocodile icefish, which has no red blood cells and clear, antifreeze-like blood. These fish live in sub-zero temperatures where most animals would freeze solid in seconds. But here's the weirdest part. They evolved this way over millions of years and were found frozen in suspended animation, only to wake up when scientists revived them in lab tanks. The creatures looked alien, with bone-white bodies and hollow eyes, sparking debate over whether life on Earth even really started here. In 2019, a disturbing creature washed up near Casey Station in East Antarctica. Part seal, part something else. The carcass was bloated with blackened eyes and an unnaturally elongated jaw. Researchers said it looked like a mutated leopard seal, but its teeth didn't match. Some speculated deep-sea radiation exposure, others whispered about secret Antarctic labs, and when locals who saw the thing up close started getting sick, the body was whisked away by a government team and never seen again. What was it? Well, no one knows, but it left behind a trail of dead fish and unanswered questions.
Imagine a microscopic creature that can survive space travel, a 12,400-year-old puppy with its brain almost perfectly preserved. And what does a bison that's been frozen for 9,000 years taste like? These are more terrifying frozen creatures scientists are too afraid to defrost. What you're looking at here is a water bear. Which Star Wars movie is it from? Well, none. These things actually exist right here at home. They're just really, really tiny, thankfully, because that thing looks like something from David Lynch's Dune. Wouldn't want to live in a world where this thing was as big as even a regular-sized house cat. Tardigrades, nicknamed water bears, are resilient, rather fascinating little creatures. They're microscopic animals that are known for their ability to survive in pretty extreme conditions. In Antarctica, tardigrades have been found frozen in ice for thousands of years. What's amazing about these little creatures is their ability to go into a state of suspended animation. When conditions are harsh, like extreme cold or dryness even, tardigrades dry out and enter a kind of hibernation. When researchers thaw them out, they can come back to life. Water bears have even survived space travel in this dormant state, making them one of the toughest known organisms. Their ability to withstand freezing, radiation, and even the vacuum of space just goes to show that these little things may be the hardiest little critters on the face of the planet. Back in 2015, Siberian herders made a pretty crazy discovery. While looking for mammoth ivory in the frozen tundra, they found a 12,400-year-old puppy frozen in the permafrost. It was incredibly well preserved. The puppy's fur, whiskers, even its little nose was still intact, which is pretty unheard of for animals that have been frozen for, tens of thousands of years. The craziest part is its brain. Most ancient animals that get frozen, especially ones that old, end up with their brains completely degraded. This puppy, though, had a brain that was almost entirely undamaged. Crazy. So, scientists think this thing could have been a link between ancient wolves and the first domesticated dogs, which is also huge. The preservation of this puppy could help us solve one of the biggest mysteries in human history. How did humans first tame wolves and turn them into dogs? By extracting its DNA, researchers could unlock a lot of answers, giving us a better idea of when and how dogs became the adorable pets that we know and love today. In 2011, a team of researchers in Siberia made an absolutely amazing find. It was a bison that had been frozen for over 9,000 years. They didn't just find bones, though. The thing was preserved like it had just died the day before. The bison was covered in thick fur, it still had some muscle tissue, and even some of its internal organs, including its heart, they were almost perfectly preserved. And that level of preservation is rare for something this old, even when frozen. And this is absolutely nuts, kind of gross. So to make things even more surreal, scientists actually cooked and ate a piece of the meat. They were curious to see what 9,000-year-old bison tasted like. Turns out the answer is not much. Apparently it was chewy, didn't really taste like a lot, because that's what happens when your meat's been sitting in the freezer for 9,000 years. I would not have tasted that, I don't think. I don't care how many scientists are around telling me it's safe. I just don't really see the point. You guys go ahead. In 2018, Russian researchers found a horsefowl in Siberia that had been frozen in permafrost for over 42,000 years. What's so mind-blowing about this find isn't just how old it was how it was preserved. The foal still had its hooves, its fur, even its internal organs. But what really sent scientists into a frenzy was the fact that its BLOOD was still inside its body. Bodily fluids from a horse that lived during the Ice Age, preserved for tens of thousands of years. Well, because there was so much of the animal still there, the discovery kind of got people talking about cloning. And it wasn't just a passing thought. Scientists started to seriously discuss whether this young horse could be the key to bringing extinct species back to life. I mean, imagine seeing a horse from the Ice Age galloping around again, just like something out of Jurassic Park. I mean, not as cool, because it would be a horse instead of a dinosaur, but still an ancient horse. It's something, at least. In 2021, scientists discovered a frozen mammoth in Siberia, and this one was unlike anything they'd seen before. Most frozen mammoths are found as skeletons, or with only small traces of flesh, but this one had actual chunks of flesh hanging from its bones. I mean, look at this thing, it almost looks like just a modern elephant. And again, It also had red stuff still in its body. Find helped scientists study how certain biological materials can survive freezing temperatures for such a long time. Researchers were able to collect samples of the BLOOD to analyze how it managed to stay in liquid form for so long, which could have massive implications for modern medicine. If scientists can figure out how mammoth BLOOD survived in permafrost, it could lead to breakthroughs in preserving organs for transplants, say. In the icy ground of Siberia, scientists have dug up baby mammoths so perfectly preserved they still have eyelashes. One of the most famous is Lyuba, found in 2007 by a reindeer herder. She's around 42,000 years old, but she still has skin, fur, internal organs. Even the milk from her mother is still inside her stomach. Another calf, Yuka, was found with strange cut marks on her bones, like something or someone had been trying to carve her up. Could have been ancient human butchering, attacks from other predators, but the truth is nobody knows exactly what happened. Every time one of these calves gets pulled from the permafrost, though, it cranks up the conversation about cloning, but even if they could bring one of these things back, should they? Once again in Siberia and Alaska, scientists have found ancient bison that are so well preserved they still had red in their veins. One of the best examples was discovered in 1979, a frozen bison they named Blue Babe because of this bluish tint from the minerals in the soil. The thing had muscle, skin, even visible wounds. It had clearly been killed by something, and then it froze before it could rot. But here's something pretty cool. These mummified bison showed signs of being stalked and eaten by predators that do not exist anymore. Deep claw marks, crushed vertebrae, and punctures that match the bite force of predators that have been extinct for a very, very long time. And scientists haven't just found one, there are multiple ancient bison mummies turning up as the permafrost melts, and each one paints a clearer picture of this brutal predatory world buried under the ice. They're also keeping samples for cloning research potentially, so if you ever wanted to see a prehistoric beast brought back from the dead, they are kind of working on it. In Yukon, Canada, buried in the permafrost, scientists uncovered the frozen remains of Ice Age horses that once galloped across the tundra in massive herds. Obviously, they weren't like today's horses. They were stockier, hairier, adapted to survive in some of the harshest conditions Earth has ever seen. One foal, perfectly preserved, was found in a gold mine in 2018, still covered in reddish-brown fur. Hooves, eyelashes, even its stomach contents intact. It was over 40,000 years old, but looked more like it had just lain down for a nap. The species, Aquis lambe, went extinct thousands of years ago, but DNA from these frozen animals are so well preserved sometimes, scientists are seriously considering using it for cloning. The idea is to bring them back, and not just as a curiosity, but possibly to repopulate the tundra with them to help slow permafrost melt. Because right now it's melting faster than ever, and we're seeing more and more pieces of an ecosystem that hasn't seen sunlight in tens of thousands of years, and not everything coming out of the ice is dead. In 2014, scientists digging through 30,000-year-old permafrost in Siberia found something that was very much not extinct, a virus, a massive one. So big you could see it under a regular microscope. They called it Pithovirus sibericum, and it's part of a terrifying new category, giant viruses. Two words you just don't want to hear right beside each other. Well, this ancient giant virus actually reanimated after being frozen for tens of thousands of years, and more of these ancient viruses have been found since, buried in melting ice, all still capable of waking up and infecting hosts. The one they revived didn't target humans, just amoebas, thankfully. But that's the part that makes researchers nervous. If some ancient virus can survive that long, what else is waiting to thaw? And are we even remotely prepared for it? Because you can quarantine, a lion, you can contain a mammoth, but a virus you've never dealt with before? Good luck. In Canada's Yukon Territory, scientists came across bones and fragments of an animal that sounds made up. Giant Ice Age camels. Yes, camels in the snow. Kind of a bizarre image. Not the two-humped animals we know today, obviously. They were massive and built to survive brutal cold, not scorching heat. They had long legs, thick fat stores, and bones tougher than steel. Fossils of these ancient camels were found in gold mines near Dawson City, preserved in permafrost so well, researchers were able to extract collagen from their bones, something that usually doesn't survive past a few thousand years. These camels would have roamed the same icy landscape as mammoths, direwolves, and saber-toothed cats. Some estimates say they stood over 9 feet tall, and while they might not look terrifying at first glance, just their sheer size, the power, the fact that they existed in this totally different version of North America, it makes them feel more like monsters than mammals. Scientists still don't completely understand how they adapted to such extreme environments or how they disappeared, but every time the ground thaws a little more bones come up, and we're starting to realize just how alien the Ice Age really was.
There's something terrifying about finding a creature perfectly preserved in ice, almost like it's just waiting to wake up. For centuries, Earth has been keeping secrets buried beneath frozen wastelands, but as glaciers melt and ancient ice cracks open, some of those secrets are being exposed, and what's been found isn't always natural. From giant beasts with no place in evolutionary timeline to strange humanoid figures trapped in permafrost, these real discoveries are disturbing, unexplained, and in some cases downright horrifying. Let's count down the most disturbing creatures ever discovered frozen in ice for centuries. In 2015, Russian scientists made a discovery that stunned the world. 2 lion cubs perfectly preserved in the Siberian permafrost. But they weren't your typical lions. These cubs belonged to a long extinct species known as the cave lion, which roamed Ice Age Eurasia. What made the discovery creepy was how well preserved they were. Skin, fur, internal organs, completely intact. One even had whiskers. Even more chilling, their sharp baby teeth suggested they were predators in the making, and possibly a warning of what else is still buried in the ice. In 2018, scientists drilling beneath Antarctica's ice shelf got more than they bargained for. They were expecting bacteria, but instead they found tiny, wiggling marine worms still alive, trapped for thousands of years in freezing dark waters beneath 2,400 feet of solid ice. Nicknamed zombie worms, these creatures had no eyes and survived off the bones of dead whales. The weirdest part? When brought to the surface, they were still alive. It was like something had kept them on pause until we hit play. Imagine coming face to face with a 9,000-year-old beast that looked like it died just yesterday. In 2011, a mummified bison was pulled from Siberia's Yukagir region. Unlike other fossilized finds, this thing was soft, with muscles, internal organs, and even blood vessels still visible. Scientists say it's the best preserved example of its kind ever found, but here's what freaked everyone out. It was in a perfect defensive posture, legs tucked under its body as if it saw death coming and braced for impact. In the Altai Mountains of Mongolia, archaeologists stumbled onto what looked like a human, but wasn't quite. In 2016, they uncovered the remains of a woman buried in ice for over 1,500 years. But something was off. Her body was covered in thick clothing made of felt and fur, but her hands were unusually long, and her feet were wrapped in strange leather boots that resembled hooves. Even more bizarre, locals believe the area was cursed, warning that, quote, demons guarded the body. The mummy's face had been partially frozen and disfigured, giving her a non-human, almost cryptid-like appearance.
In 2022, scientists revived a virus that had been frozen for nearly 50,000 years. A virus called Pandoravirus yedoma was discovered in the Siberian permafrost. Fortunately, it only infects single-celled organisms, but the fact that something can survive being frozen for thousands and thousands of years and still be infectious, that opens up a lot of questions and concerns. For one, if a virus can stay in a state of suspended animation for that long and come back to life, what other dormant viruses or pathogens could be lurking in the melting permafrost? Scientists are especially concerned because climate change is causing permafrost to thaw at a pretty alarming rate, meaning more ancient viruses and bacteria could be released into the world. There could be viruses from the Ice Age that might be deadly to humans. You know, us modern folk just wouldn't have the immunity to them. Kimberly Miner, a climate scientist at the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, had this to say: "There's a lot going on with the permafrost that is of concern, and it really shows why it's super important that we keep as much of the permafrost frozen as possible." End quote. Now, to some, an old virus trapped in ice suddenly springing back to life and spreading across the world sounds like a zombie movie plot, and sure, the chances of things getting that bad are slim, but these frozen viruses are actually sometimes referred to as zombie viruses, and scientists have discovered some pretty unsettling things in the permafrost over the years. For example, in 1997, a lung sample from a woman buried in permafrost in Alaska was found to contain genetic material from the 1918 flu epidemic. Then in 2012, researchers confirmed that a 300-year-old mummy from Siberia had the genetic signatures of the smallpox virus, and just in 2016, there was a small anthrax outbreak in Siberia, which affected a small group of people and thousands of reindeer. This was also thanks to thawing permafrost. On a lighter note though, let's briefly talk about nematodes, also known as roundworms. This is another type of microscopic thing that can survive through freezing temperatures. In Antarctica, researchers have discovered these tiny worms frozen in the ice. Like tardigrades, nematodes can enter a state of suspended animation when conditions become too hard, and when they're thawed, they can sometimes revive and resume their normal activities. Not sure what nematodes get up to, probably not all that interesting, but still they can go back to doing whatever it is, which is pretty cool. It's also pretty cool is that scientists study these nematodes because their ability to survive might give us some clues about how to preserve other biological material and learn more about how life might survive in other extreme environments on Earth or even out in space. In 2020, researchers discovered the preserved remains of a woolly rhino on a Russian island. It still had some fur, its skin, and muscle tissue. What made it even more interesting is that the rhino was still a juvenile when it died, likely around 3 or 4 years old. Now, why is this so interesting? Well, because it was so young, only about 3 or 4, it helped researchers learn more about what growing up in the Ice Age was actually like, what they ate, how fast it grew, what kind of hellish environment it was dealing with, and how these things would have developed as they aged. In terms of how it died, it couldn't say for sure, but it looked like it probably drowned after falling through ice into freezing water. Instant deep freeze. This thing kind of looks like a brick too. It's like flat. Oh. Again, in 2020, scientists found a bird frozen so perfectly that it looked like it had just fallen out of the sky. It was a horned lark and had been dead for about 46,000 years. 46,000 years, and it looked like this. You know, still not like a great way for your body to be. Obviously the thing is dead, right? It doesn't look great. But if I were just looking at this image with no context, I would have thought it was dead for maybe 6 months. Not, 46,000 years. The bird was encased in ice, which preserved it in almost the same way it would have looked back in the Ice Age. Scientists took DNA samples to compare it to modern birds. The goal was to learn about how species evolved over tens of thousands of years and possibly understand how the climate changes of that era might have influenced bird evolution. Also gave them a great look at how the Ice Age didn't just freeze mammals, it preserved all kinds of life forms. In 2019, reindeer herders in Siberia came across something pretty macabre, but also really cool. A severed bear head, frozen solid in the permafrost. But this was a very old bear, a Pleistocene cave bear, a giant of the Ice Age that could grow up to 11 feet tall and weigh over 3,000 pounds. The head was almost perfectly preserved with fur, teeth, and even the brain still inside. The cave bear has been extinct for about 24,000 years, but this head was so well preserved it almost looked like it had been frozen yesterday. And I know what you're thinking, but no, they did not find the body. How did just the head survive so perfectly, and where is the rest of it? Was it scavenged? That would be my guess. Hunters would have probably killed the thing and then ate the rest of its body.